I start with some thanks. First of all, thanks to Pietro Bartolo for hosting us once more. We are hosted by an MP who have spent years to save refugees from the sea. So I think that it's moving to be in this room now, in these days. Then thanks to Birgit Van Hout, always close with us and always with us. And these days tell us how it is crucial to fully recognize and to support the UN role to manage conflicts in a multilateral way for preventing them to explode. And last, but of course not least, thanks a lot to Vera Jourova, which will join us, the Commission's Vice President, for her time and attention devoted to us today and in many other occasions, because it is very important for us to have a so prominent member of the Commission committed to the relation with the organized civil society. So let's start, even if it is not easy at all this time to find the words, because we never could imagine we would have to hold this meeting in such a tragic and dramatic situation with the war inside Europe. This meeting is aimed to celebrate our shared values and civic pride. You know, this is an annual event to point out the great civic energy opposing everywhere the growing threat to democracy, equality, and solidarity. This event is also a tool to discuss with institutions, calling them
to discuter avec les institutions pour reconnaître le rôle.
Because our possibility to act in full independence must be supported by politics and tools, by a permanent dialogue and cooperation. But today we find ourselves in a situation where the word pride, award, celebration really are in contrast with the dark times we are living in. And we asked ourselves in the past day the questions, is still this event useful while war is inside our home? We are shocked, we are full of pain, we are afraid, and many of us are working day and night to face the humanitarian disaster. Nevertheless, we thought, yes, we believe that our messages and demands remain relevant and more urgent than ever. In these war days, we see everywhere civil society organizations at the forefront for responding to the emergency. In the invaded and bombed and suffering Ukraine, with all population at risk and in need for urgent assistance and support, in Russia and Belarus, where common and prominent people take the streets, take the risk, and demonstrate their opposition to the Putin war, in Poland, Romania, Moldova, and in the other border countries where the democratic and independent civil society, since Romania, Moldova of the war, and in the other devoting their energy to rescue, welcome, and assist millions of refugees. Sometimes, like in Poland, despite the lack of systemic solution and support at the level of the state authorities. And all over the European Union, we see everywhere a large mobilization against the war, for the ceasefire, for the withdrawal of the Russian troops, for the negotiation and the political solution, as well as huge activities to organize solidarity with the refugees and the victims, for welcoming all refugees all over the European Union territories, for providing a humanitarian, legal, any kind of support for millions of people crossing the borders, for collecting and sending and distributing medicines and essential goods. Altogether, all of these actions shows that elements to imagine a shared and common future, despite the period in which we are living, exist, even in times of war. We prove that we can imagine on this basis a shared and common future, and we are proud of it. And once again, these make evident why Europe needs a strong civic space, that enabling all forms of active citizenship and civic activism, not only as service providers or implementers of public policies, but also to raise awareness, to self-organize people, to address burning issues, to channel the goodwill and the good energy of many citizens. This is true in time of peace, and it's true in time of crisis. We have seen it in the past 2 years in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We see it in relation to the eco-climate crisis and the related natural disasters. And again, it is clear in the context of war and authoritarianism that, as we can see today, very clearly feed each other in an horrible vicious circle. The best source of antibodies to the virus of authoritarianism is an independent, active, and sustainable civil society. And this is the reason why we are always among the first targets of the authoritarian powers. But we also know that civic action alone is not enough. The institutions are crucial also to guarantee, protect, and support the possibility for us to act as independent actors. We will hear today from our colleagues in Poland, Hungary, and elsewhere in Europe how the lack of cooperation and support from public authorities creates problems in crisis to the whole society, not only to us. Coordination, while respecting the different roles, should be a stable and permanent process, also to be ready for addressing future emergencies. Our resources and capacities have been somewhere reduced during the last years by measures aimed at shrinking the civic space and by pandemic too. So we should need a special attention in this time and a special support. So we hope that our meeting today can help us to make some step forward all together. And again, we thank you all for your participation in this event, and we hope in a fruitful discussion. Let's hope to bring at least a little bit of hope in these dark days. And I don't know if Okay, I am very happy because it seems that Vera Jourova has joined us. And so I am very happy to give her the floor. I told before, she is the Vice President of the European Commission in charge of values and transparency, including for maintaining an open, transparent, regular dialogue with other European Union institutions, citizens, representative association and civil society, and for safeguarding the right of peaceful assembly and the freedom of association. And again, as I told already at the beginning, many thanks, Vice President, for the time and the attention devoted to us today, and not only today. For us, it's precious to have you here, especially in these dark times. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, for inviting me to this important event. Yes, these are dark times. and we all have to do the right things. And so allow me to start my speech by paying tribute to the brave people of Ukraine who, as we speak, suffer for many long days now, the vile and despicable aggression of a criminal tyrant against their freedom, independence, and lives. The unjustified and unprovoked invasion of a peaceful country by another is a horrible situation that we hoped we would never again witness on our continent. It is precisely to avoid such situations that the EU was created in the first place. And it is also because of that that my country, Czech Republic, and others in Central Europe decided to join the Union. For prosperity, for democracy, for peace, and to never ever have to witness again the horrors of war. But the very fact that the Ukrainians opted for democracy is actually what the tyrant in the Kremlin could not accept. It is civil society organizations who play a vital role in defending and protecting democracy and fundamental rights. And as I have said many times, civil society is vital for a healthy democracy and a society where people can effectively enjoy their rights. In the European Union, civil society are key partners in bringing to life the values shared between the EU and its member states specified in Article 2 of the Treaty on the European Union. We have seen it so often and so much in times of crisis like the pandemic we just went through over the last 2 years, or now during this horrible war in Ukraine. Civil society organizations help refugees and mobilize humanitarian aid. They defend victims of fundamental rights violations, in particular the more vulnerable people. They stand up for the human rights and democratic cause, like for the independence of the judiciary. And the European Commission consistently seeks to empower civil society. We put civil society at the heart of each of our recent strategies pertaining to fundamental rights, be it in the strategy to strengthen the application of the Charter of Fundamental Rights or the European Democracy Action Plan. Because it is civil society who help make rights effective on the ground and foster the resilience of our democracies. To carry out these tasks, civil society needs to be able to work in a safe and enabling environment. This is why in the Commission we have stepped up efforts to support civil society organizations. I am aware that in particular the smaller local ones find it hard to survive given the constraints they are facing. Our Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values funding program with an available budget of 1.55 billion euro can help. It is the biggest fund supporting directly NGOs and fundamental rights inside the EU. Several calls for proposals to provide action grants to grassroots organizations in particular were published, as well as calls on funding for equality, including gender equality and citizens' engagement and participation. With these funds, we want to send a clear message. We need civil society organizations to play their role independently and efficiently. But as much as money is key, it is not enough. Civil society organizations need to be protected since they are facing an increasing number of challenges. In the Commission, we are aware that there is a progressive erosion of the civic space in some member states, in particular as regards civil society organizations engaged in the promotion of fundamental rights, democracy and the rule of law. Over the past few years, we are seeing laws and government actions trying to interfere with civil society organizations' work, their independence and their operations. These attacks to civil society organizations are taking different forms. Regulatory constraints, smear campaigns, burdensome administrative requirements and difficulties in accessing funding are only some of them. We have taken action measures against measures affecting civil society organizations that are contrary to EU law, including the Charter of Fundamental Rights. We have, for instance, pursued infringement proceedings regarding Hungary and their NGO law, as well as their limitations to the publication of certain children books by NGOs, and we will continue to do so where needed. We know there are also instances of intimidation and harassment, including abusive lawsuits, the so-called strategic lawsuits against public participation. The Commission will soon adopt an initiative to protect journalists and civil society against abusive litigation. To equip ourselves with fresh data, our 2022 Fundamental Rights Charter report will focus on the civil society organizations and rights defenders' situation in the EU and in individual member states. Let me put it in a simple way. Supporting civil society organizations is a priority for the Commission. We gathered here today to acknowledge civil society organizations for your outstanding work. Let me thank you wholeheartedly for what you are doing to protect our democracies and fundamental values, which are the EU's main asset. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Vice President, thanks a lot. And I don't want to waste time for you and for anybody else, so I would like to let you and all of us the possibility to listen to voices from Poland representing civil society actors fully committed in these days in the current crisis in order to provide you the possibility to react after their short interventions. I will give the floor now to Marta Lampard of the Polish Women's Strike. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm Marta Lampard. I represent Polish Women's Strike. It's a grassroots organization that is basically fighting for women's rights, human rights, but also for the rule of law and judicial independence in Poland. And I have one simple question. What will be done to stop Polish government from using the war refugee crisis to destroy the rule of law in Poland and to completely wipe out not only civic freedoms, but basic human rights? As you know, the Russian war, amongst others, caused a refugee crisis of an enormous scale in Poland. And it's us, the non-government organizations, it's us, the citizens, and it's us, the local governments and municipalities that they took upon the challenge. We provide help, we provide shelter, we provide food, we provide assistance. We are the ones who are actually doing that. And the fact that the Polish government tries to paint themselves as a hero in the situation, while their actual engagement is close to non-existent and it's mostly concentrated on hijacking the credit for the civic engagement, is absolutely outrageous to me. But it's not only that's not the only thing that the government in Poland is doing. That's why my question, because the most significant actions of the ruling majority during the wartime are really scary. We saw almost 200 non-judges elected by the illegally established National Council of Judiciary appointed just now. We saw Adam Roch, who is an infamous former prosecutor who was subject of the European Court of Justice ruling because he was questioning a woman in labor, which was recognized as a torture, to be a chair of the illegal disciplinary chamber. We see the ruling majority, we see the government ignoring the European Court of Justice rulings and interim measures, including the interim measure on the disciplinary chamber. We see the so-called disciplinary chamber still persecuting judges, and now new election procedure to the this illegal National Council of Judiciary. We also saw the attempt to vote legislation that would guarantee impunity to the officials for their actions during the crisis, including fraud. So this is just typical. So my particular questions are not about the help that we can get, because we are managing here, but will there be any reaction to what Polish government is doing in the crisis against the rule of law? Will there be any reaction to the fact that these illegal appointments at the National Council of Judiciary are still happening, and illegal appointments of judges because we will have judicial system filled with non-rulings by non-judges in a really short time if it caps this, if the speed is the same. Will there be any demand for Poland to comply with the European Court of Justice rulings on disciplinary chamber, on persecuting Polish judges, on muzzling, on the so-called muzzle law? And will the budget conditionality mechanism be upheld? Will it prevent Poland from the destruction of the rule of law? Or will it just be given up? Because that's what we've heard. And I think Polish government's attitude towards human rights issues, non-governmental organizations, civic actors is widely known and proven. I am, of course, myself, not only repressed with over 90 cases pending against me, but I was also a subject of police violence. I was a subject of illegal detention. My biggest fear is not that, because I know I will manage. And my biggest fear is not even the refugee crisis in Poland, because I know, and we saw and we proved that we can manage, not thanks to the government, but in spite and instead of it. But being betrayed by the European community on the key issue of the rule of law, in this warm time, us, the citizens, the activists, the brave judges, we might not manage. Because it's the same people praised for the civic reaction to the refugee crisis that are possibly will be left alone. And the question is, are you giving up on us? Will you let the Polish government use the refugee crisis in the most horrible, twisted, evil way against the citizens, against the core European values, against the rule of law? How can we even consider that? Because that's what we've heard. That's what we see. That's what we are scared about. Not anything else. We can manage the rest. We've been doing this and we'll be doing it. But still, if the EU gives up on us on the rule of law issue, we will be gone. I don't know how then we can work. How can we do? How can we prevent ourselves from being completely wiped out and destroyed by our government? This is my question, not about the crisis, but about what can be done and what will be done to stop Polish government from using the crisis against citizens and the basic European values and destroying totally the rule of law in Poland. That's my question.
Thank you, Marta. Very hot questions, but the situation is hot indeed. And now Karolina Dresner, Polish National NGO Federation.
Thank you, dear Madam Commissioner. As we can observe in the times of the war in Ukraine, that civil society was first there at the border to help with the migrants. And if there was a need for other reasons to support civil society, in these times we proved how important a strong, resilient and healthy civil society is. The Polish civil society representatives demanded the permanent inclusion of NGOs in the crisis management system of public administration at every level. And as representatives of the National Federation of Polish NGOs, we have also prepared so-called social component to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Unfortunately, this proposal was not included in the plan adopted by the government of Poland and sent to the European Commission. And as the current situation demonstrates, applying the solutions proposed would strengthen NGOs in their efforts to contain the humanitarian crisis. This is why we urge the European Commission to pay due diligence in any direct or shared management programs or instruments to open the EU support to all, especially to those NGOs that are supporting the Ukrainian refugees now and will support their integration into European society soon. This should be explicitly underlined in any discussion and agreement between the European Commission and the Polish authorities. Civil society capacities have been hollowed over the years. As guardians of the law and the democratic values, they were always present at the front line of activities related to climate challenges, respect of the rule of law and the fundamental rights or rights of migrants. We need a strong and vibrant civil society, and we need also its independence, the autonomy from the will of those in power who often are willing to support NGOs only when they are obedient enough and not criticize the decision of the government. The independent third sector is facing long-term risk if civic actors are not sufficiently supported in the current crisis and beyond. I would like to ask how, in the long term, is the European Commission planning to contribute to build civil society's capacities in times of peace and sustain them in the times of crisis? Thank you.
Thank you, and Vice President, thank you again for reacting to these first two questions, which are in this moment, according to all of us, very important. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. First, to react on Marta Lampard, and let me make a personal note. I'm following Madam Marta, what you are doing, and I know that you are the example of for all the people who need courage to work in the field of human rights and fundamental rights, because I remember times around 2014-15 when it was a kind of business as usual to defend the fundamental rights. It was a kind of taken for granted, and then over time we saw extreme increase of pressure harassment and attacks on those who are raising their voice in the interest of others. And I know that for gender equality, you are one of the role models and really courageous fighters. So thank you for that. On the question whether we are giving up on to defend the rule of law and democracy in Europe, if we would give up on these principles, Putin would win, because the war in Ukraine cannot be the start of dismantling our principles we have in the EU. So I don't know what you heard about us giving up something. We, of course, now support Poland in doing the right things, especially in helping refugees. And my big thank and respect goes to the people of Poland and to NGOs working on the ground, because this is unimaginable humanitarian crisis, and the refugees, the mothers and children coming from Ukraine and need help, and thank you for that. At the same time, we are supporting Poland in helping Ukraine through humanitarian help on the territory of Ukraine. So we are working on this front and also deploying a lot of funding, but at the same time we are continuing what we did before. We are addressing the issues in the rule of law and judiciary, especially in Poland, through the tools we have in hands, and we are doing so for years, and we continue. So this is what we do through the infringement procedures. One of them also react on the unprecedented and rather surprising or even shocking decisions of the Constitutional Tribunal. We are very strongly demanding the fulfillment of the Court of Justice decision on the disciplinary chamber. The disciplinary chamber has to stop functioning, and the judges who have been penalized have to come back, back to work. And we are using all the tools, including the conditionality principle, where we are now analyzing the reply of Poland on our letter, which we sent some time ago, because conditionality regulation is in force. So I don't know who told you that we have stopped or we want to stop. This is not the right information, because as I said, we have to continue defending the principle of rule of law on European territory. And what it was Madame Carolina who spoke as the second speaker, yeah. In the long term, we are supporting, and we will continue to do so, supporting the civil society organizations by two channels. We are more and more engaging them through the different pieces of legislation in having the official role in different areas. I'd like to mention the permanent strengthening of the role of the equality bodies, for instance. And this is something which stems from the legislation. The second very important part of our support to NGOs is through the funding. And I mentioned in my opening speech the program Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values, which has the biggest amount of money ever for this programming period. Also for the cohesion money, ESF, ERDF, we insisted that the civil society organizations have to be participating in formulating the programs for funding. It's a very strong demand, also based on legally binding legislation. The same when it comes to recovery fund. We wanted the member states to engage or to involve the civil society organizations in the planning of where this money will be used. And when you look into our notes or our texts relating to where the recovery money should go, there is a very strong emphasis that this money should increase in inclusive society and help those who are vulnerable and who need the support from the public funding. So the Commission is doing everything also vis-à-vis Poland to impose the pressure on the official places to include the NGOs into all that work. And if I may also add the question to Carolina, you spoke about shared management. And especially now in the time of crisis, when we are going to send a lot of money to the member states, especially to help them to manage the refugee influx. Do you have any idea of how such shared management could be set up? Because we are now discussing it in the Commission. And I am, if there is somebody who is always on the side of the strongest possible involvement of the NGOs, it's me. So I am the good addressee to be given the advice. Just tell me whether you have some model in mind which might be used. So sorry, I'm not used to answer by asking questions, but it could be also a useful dialogue for me. It is useful dialogue anyway.
If I may allow myself
to
just
be
to
given
tell
the advice,
you, Madam Commissioner,
anyway.
and we will provide you some ideas.
If I may allow myself
just
to
to
give
tell
the advice
with a big group of the NGOs to think how it could function, because it's really true what we learn from this crisis and this crisis which we already faced, that the real engagement of the civil society in this quick reaction system, reaction on crisis, it's crucial, because otherwise, and if we are thinking about the possible, sadly, next crisis which we could face soon, we need to be sure that civil society will be engaged at the level of the preparation of the system, as also at the level of the management of the system. And what I wanted to mention in my speech, that to have that, we need to have the strong civil society. It means that we need to invest the means to build the civil society capacity to be ready to react. So we will provide you, Madam Commissioner, some ideas on paper, and we are ready to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you be quick? Sorry, but we will be discussing in the coming days, before next week Wednesday, how to best help, especially the countries which now are in the biggest need of support. So I thank ahead for any valuable input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that this is a commitment we really could take upon us. And also in order to inform you and to send you proposals, of course, coming from the hottest country, but also perhaps from in order to share some good practices we have in some countries. In my countries, we have a lot of problems, but for example, with the emergency situation now, we are sitting everywhere in all the institutional stable we have, and perhaps it would be interesting to understand in which good practices we have, and your voice it's very important to be raised in front of the national governments. It is important now for the crisis, for the war. It is important for all the destination of the recovery funds. It's really important because I think that really in many countries we have problems when not in theory, but in practice, when politics has to be implemented to have recognized the role and the need to involve in public politics the role, the independent role of the civil society. And for us today, I think it's very important to listen to you once again, a strong recognition of our role, and also our role as a milestone in terms of protecting, defending, and implementing the universal values which are at the basis of the European Union project, and which really can be a sort of basement on which we can rebuild a common and shared future. So
Rafaela,
we have some times for one or two intervention more, and Jean-Robert can have the floor.
I would like also to share with Commissioner Jourova one thought. There is no miracle in the time of crisis. I mean that what works in normal times works in crisis, and when it does not work in normal times, this relation between institutions and NGOs, the moment of crisis usually don't solve anything. So we will discuss with you about short-term solutions, but we know that we have to work together on the long-term solution so that we feel at ease at each moment of this life, and not only discovering that something dysfunction at the time of crisis, but we will try to provide you with some possible things to do in the next days, and we listen that you need some inputs before next Wednesday.
I do, yes, thanks, yes.
Marta and Veronica then.
Thank you. That's a great relief, because this is the general press stance now that Poland will be given like lighter for whatever is happening. We actually send an appeal to the Commission. It's an alliance of the NGOs working for the rule of law, appealing for example. We put a proposal to establish a program that would be like the rights and values program. So just aimed at NGOs, and I put it on the chat, and I can also send it again, the mail, if it's because it's one of the proposals at least.
Yeah, I am. I would be really very happy if this money helps good things and efficient things. Yeah, because I am in the Commission more than 7 years, and believe me, I saw projects which were just spending. Yeah. And I don't have any hesitation that it might be the case, especially in the time of crisis, when we have to wait every euro and every zloty now, that the money goes where it's needed. If I can add, Madam Lampard, to also what you said before on the judiciary reform in Poland, of course, we are also focusing on the National Judiciary Council, which you mentioned, and where we see the new people coming. I see now the situation in Polish judiciary as one big mess, Yeah, because the former judges are combined with new judges. And I think that the result of is that there is a high level of legal uncertainty now, especially for Polish people, but also for the investors and economic players. I think that I don't see any winner of this reform, and there are only losers. And we have lost too much energy, too much money also, much of reputation of Poland has been lost over the way through this judiciary reform. Yeah, so I would really like to see our tools to be more efficient and to see some steps taken in Poland which will maybe try to unscramble the scrambled eggs, which is never possible, as we know. but I think that there is always the way of correcting things. And we see that you build the judiciary system and the rule of law system in a member state or in a state over decades, and then you can demolish it overnight. That's a tragedy, which we also see in practice. So let's see how it will develop further now. But I have to assure you again that the Commission is going on, and we have to also fulfill our obligations.
Okay, if I just may add, actually we have a solution to that, because one of the 5 bills in the Polish Parliament that are supposed to resolve the judicial problem is the opposition plus the NGOs, Justitia, the Judges Association bill that resolves all the problems. It's on the table, it's in the Parliament, and it was signed by all the opposition parties. So there is the answer to what has to be done for the rule of law to be reestablished. There's already a bill in the Parliament, so we've never been closer to actually doing something constructive, not only opposing the mess.
Yeah, good, thanks, thank you. I know about the law, let's hope.
Vera.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your words, Vice President. I'd just like to mention 2 things. One is that we really acknowledge and appreciate all the efforts that you and generally EU institutions do to recognize and support civil society as partners or allies in maintaining democracy in Europe. However, the devil often lies in the details. And if, for example, financial support, which is greatly appreciated, comes with strings attached that are very hard to meet for the target groups, for example, in terms of co-funding requirements, then the funding may not be useful at all or be so difficult as to do, well, maybe it's a bit strong, but maybe to do more harm than to actually help. So I think this is also an area where closer cooperation with civil society prior to making the decisions would be relevant to design support programs in a way that are really helpful to the target group, to the small civil society organizations. Besides, in terms of programs under shared management and the need to consult civil society in those, I understand and I know that there are legal requirements for a member state to do that. But what if the member state does it as a token exercise, just as a box-ticking exercise? Another example I can bring from Hungary is that in the recovery facility, there will be, or according to the plans, there will be quite significant money to fight or to mitigate poverty, especially among the Roma people in Hungary. Now it looks like that this money will be awarded to one single organization by the Hungarian government without any open competition, any conditions or transparency. And we don't think that this is the proper way to spend EU monies, even if for a very good purpose. So that was my first point, is we really need to pay attention to the details and work together to find, you should consider, or civil society organizations are allies in this sense because they work on the ground and see these details that may not be very visible at the first sight. On the other hand, I think besides all the tools and measures that you have mentioned, which are very important for us, I think civil society could and should be treated as an entity and an asset in the EU on its own. And I think one of the ways that could provide this acknowledgement and to raise the importance of civil society on the public agenda or the EU's agenda is to devote some kind of a policy or strategy that is dealing with civil society in itself and not just as an instrument to implement certain EU policies. There is an initiative in the European Parliament towards this goal or in this effect. And I'm just wondering, what is your reaction to that? What is your feedback on this new initiative from the LIBE committee? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. On the LIBE committee, I have to ask my colleagues to give it to me because I have not read it. Yeah, no, I'm honest. I could have told you that this is very interesting initiative, blah blah blah. Yeah, this is not my style, but I will look into that. On Roma financing, can you please send me by email more information about that? Because this is as you said, the devil is in detail, and maybe I'm lacking proper detailed information about that. And on co-financing, it is true that even 5% of co-financing is a big barrier for the NGOs. Yeah, I am aware of that. I have to consult it with the colleagues who are responsible for financial management, because now in the context of the Ukrainian war, we have decided to waive the co-financing from cohesion money. So there will be 100% co-financing from the EU budget. And maybe we should look at other sources or other funding programs, because I think that we should also be fair and create the similar conditions to everybody. I am aware that co-financing or even pre-financing is absolutely no-go barrier for the NGOs to apply for the money and to do sensible things. For the funding in the wartime, it reminds me of the refugee crisis in 2016, when I was working with Greek authorities and Greek NGOs on the best model of financing the support for refugees. And we tried to find the ways which were the most quick and efficient. Yeah, because the speed and efficiency now are also at stake. So thank you for these inputs, and on Hungary and the financing. Could you please share with me more information by email? Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this news also about the co-financing. On the recovery facility, there will be soon an official complaint submitted.
Okay, good, thank you. Not good, but good that it will come. Yeah, thank you, Madam Veronica. I will have to leave in few minutes, and I know I am the one who is making it long. But
no, you are the one who make this dialogue a real dialogue, the kind of dialogue really we need. So we really want to thank you a lot, really a lot, and by sure we will get in touch in the next hours. We will try to organize as a network a way for communicating with you in the best way in order to provide
you know that my contact person is Monika Ladmanova, who I guess is following this debate. Yes, so
yeah. So
your antenna, which is very close to me. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I don't know how to say more, because thank you is a little is little now in this occasion, and you provide us with really with some hope. We need it. Let's do our best.
I thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye. We can go on, and yes, I think that in the next minutes, in the next hours, we have to understand how to implement this dialogue on the very crucial and hot and urgent issues we discussed now. There is Roger. I have seen Roger who want to speak. We have other 6 minutes, so we can go on a little.
No, it's fine, Raffaella. No problem at all. It's fine. I had one more question to the commissioner, but we're going to be following up with her, so that's excellent. Well,
but you can, if you transform the question in an issue, we can use your issue in the future relations.
Especially that Monica is with us, so she listens to what we say.
So let me say a couple of things, and thank you very much indeed. And what an encouragement from the Commissioner for us to develop the dialogue with her, and we need to do that quickly. I think in response to what she said about the dialogue and what civil society could do, I mean, one idea might be to set up something like a civil society task force, not symbolic platforms, but real task force. It could be populated by some of the organisations on this call. So I think we want to really press as much as possible. And I think the other thing to say to her is to put it in the context of the conclusions on the Conference on the Future of Europe, because it's very important, I think, that there is some kind of follow-up to the Conference on the Future of Europe that embeds the role of civil society and citizens and organised civil society. And I think that's another opportunity to strengthen the role of civil society. And what I would have said to her was that what Marta has said to us about how if the Commission is not able, and the European Union is not able to hold the line on the rule of law in Poland, what I would have said to her, that doesn't just go for Poland. I mean, if they can't hold the rule of hold the line in Poland, they can't hold the line anywhere else. It doesn't just take the carpet out under the feet of Marta and her colleagues. It takes the feet out of the carpet away from all of us. And this is a fight for the future of Europe, not just in Poland. I think we needed to make that point too. And finally, two very, if I may, Raphael, two very other points. I wouldn't have had time to answer the Commissioner, but I can make them to you. A lot of talk at the moment about Ukraine joining the European Union, but let's remember that Ukraine already has an association agreement with the European Union. And, we can talk a long time about whether it can or it can't be, a member of the European Union, NATO and so on. But what can be done now and should be done now is deepening the association agreement. And there's a big civil society dimension to that as well. So just to point out. And just finally, if I may, a little advertisement for what we're doing at the moment, we're pressing for the Europeans for the establishment of an ad hoc criminal court, because let's remember, Russia is not part of the International Criminal Court. It's not a signatory to it. So how are we going to bring Putin to account? I'll put something in the chat about that. We're one of a big alliance, so we're not the leaders of this, but I would like to draw that to your attention. I'm sure to have the support of everybody in this meeting, and I'll put more information about it in the chat. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Roger. We have 3 minutes left, so there is time if you want for another person to speak. If we have nobody else, I think that yes, we can so close this part of the debate. I hope that everybody of you have the same feeling of mine, which have been really useful to confirm our event today, and that from this short but intense discussion, something concrete can come. It's only a suggestion, because We have also Birgit, which come from the UN system. She will speak later, but I think that, for example, in terms of emergency financial help to support to NGOs working in crisis time, they have a very good and experimented mechanism. So perhaps there could be also an interinstitutional exchange in order to help as much as possible the European Commission to take the good step in this direction. And so now I think that, yes, we can close this part, and I give the moderation to Giada for the following part.
Thank you, Raffaella, and thank you all for being with us today. We enter the more celebratory part of the event today, even though with heavy feelings, as we heard earlier. So as every year, last year we have launched an open call for nomination to find outstanding civic initiatives across Europe. And the ECR steering committee has selected 6+1 to be awarded today. We believe that in this context of growing challenges against rights and democracy, including the war raging today in Europe, it is crucial to recognize and praise the tremendous civic energy that stands for equality and solidarity and strives to defend the democratic foundations of our living together. Also, we wanted to narrate the developments of civic space that we observe in Europe today through the stories of those that witness, experience, and shape these on first hands on the ground. In other words, we want to give the trends analyzed through research and analysis in the pages of our reports, faces, and voices. So what are the trends that we observe today? So today we not only celebrate civic initiatives, 7 civic initiatives that are with us today, but we also launch the Activismship 6, Stories of Hope in Dark Times, our annual report on civic space in Europe, which looks specifically at 2021, which continued to be dominated by the pandemic crisis, mobilizing and challenging civil society. What we observe is that in 2021, the general sense of trust in the collective capacities of institutions to find an inclusive way out of the crisis and build back better that had characterized the first part of the COVID-19 emergency seems to have worn down by the growing fears for the futures, especially the long-term socioeconomic impact of restrictions. The lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic that showed the flaws of our economic system that left so many people vulnerable in the crisis, and the urgency to put care and solidarity at the center of our public policies to build a fairer future. All these lessons risk to get lost. We see that divisive narratives and discriminatory political proposals are gaining ground in the public sphere, and anti-rights and anti-democratic groups and parties are benefiting from these societal tensions and fears. Who is paying the price the most are the most vulnerable in our society: the racialized groups, the women, the LGBTI community, and all those that stand for them or with them, their representative associations. But in this very challenging, gloomy picture that I'm painting, we are not losing hope, because at the same time that we see the mechanisms that we have described for a year are continuing to restrict civic space, we also see signs that civil society seems to be more and more recognized by citizens for their action taken during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have also seen important victories.
Organizacje sygnalizują, że chcą się wycofywać i chcą komuś to.
Sorry. We have also seen important victories and steps forwards for the rights for all that took place in the past year, and some of which we will hear today, which provide us some hope in very dark times. So it is with pleasure that now I open the ceremony to award the part of the ceremony dedicated to award the inspiring initiatives collected in the pages of Activismship 6. Maybe let's take a moment to imagine ourselves in the rooms of the European Parliament, where we would have held this conference, this award in pre-pandemic times. And without further ado, I pass the word to Birgit Van Hout, the regional representative for Europe of the OHCHR, who today, as always, stands with us. Thank you so much, Birgit. The word is yours.
Thank you very much, Giada. Honorable Member of the European Parliament, Mr. Bartolo, dear co-presidents of the European Civic Forum, Ms. Bollini and Monsieur Roiron, dear civil society representatives, friends and colleagues. It is once again an honor to be invited to the Civic Pride Awards, and I keep also very fond souvenirs and memories of our previous award ceremonies. I'm very proud and also moved to be part of this award ceremony again, as we witness the impressive mobilization and resilience of volunteers and civil society to oppose the raging war in Ukraine, to monitor abuses and prompt international justice, to call on governments across Europe and the world to stand up for peace and work together towards a ceasefire, and especially to support civilians, the main victims of this conflict and of any conflict, by disseminating trustworthy information, welcoming and assisting the hundreds of thousands of people fleeing war zones, collecting medical supplies, food, and basic necessities, and sending them to the millions of civilians who remain in the country as well. In this incredible display of civic responsibility and solidarity in Ukraine and in all countries across Europe, civil society bravely stands at the forefront, driving a major collective effort to respond to such large-scale human rights and humanitarian crisis. NGOs, associations, grassroots movements, and informal groups of activists work relentlessly, relying on their own resources often, and against unprecedented time, financial, and psychological constraints and pressures. This effort comes on top of their intense engagement to support authorities and communities in responding to the public health emergency that we've been facing over the past 2 years. In fact, organizations, associations, grassroots movements, and informal groups of activists that are helping to contain the humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding in Ukraine are the very same that have been fighting for human rights, equality, and justice over the past years at home, including within the borders of the European Union. The stories documented in the Civic Space Watch report and the organizations that are being awarded the Civic Pride Award today reflect this very well. They tell of efforts to protect and support the most marginalized groups in society. They stand up for equality, irrespective of the color of one's skin, nationality, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. They monitor abuses and call for accountability. They defend civic engagement and democratic participation. Veronica, Ahmed, Natalie, Denitsa, Kuba, Carolina, Lisa. I look at your stories of courage And I congratulate all of you for your resilience and determination, for your enduring commitment to giving a concrete meaning to the rights, freedoms, and values that unite us, and for inspiring so many others to do the same. And I commend the European Civic Forum for showcasing these brave and impactful initiatives, which exemplify once again the crucial role that civil society plays in safeguarding democracy and the human rights of all of us. The stories today also serve to remind us how these efforts are often frustrated by the lack of help, as we've heard in some of the questions that were just asked, or in some cases, the active obstruction by the very same state authorities who, in times of emergency, acknowledge and praise or get praised for their civil society efforts and resilience. Civil society in general and human rights defenders in particular increasingly face, as Commissioner Jourova also said, a very unfavorable regulatory and political landscape, whether we're talking about restrictive rules on registration, transparency and dissolution, the criminalization of humanitarian assistance, lack of avenues for participation in law and policy making, a challenging financing framework, negative narratives, or smear campaigns against critical organizations and activists working on the rule of law, anti-corruption, women's rights, LGBTI rights, the rights of people of African or Arab descent, or environmental matters. And this deteriorating landscape also makes activists and human rights defenders more vulnerable to verbal and physical threats and attacks, online and offline, as well as legal harassment by non-state actors, the infamous slaps that was already talked about. And more often than not, these slaps go unpunished. Restrictions, attacks, and impunity not only hinder civil society's work, but what we also see is that they lead to self-censorship and they discourage civic activism more broadly. Against this background, promoting and supporting a vibrant civic space becomes even more urgent. Without recognition, adequate support, and protection, the efforts of civil society cannot be sustained in the long term. EU member states' duty to promote, protect, and respect civic space and to create an enabling environment for civil society directly stems from their obligations under the international human rights treaties. Preserving freedom of association, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of expression and information is also an inherent part of respect for the rule of law. And let's not forget that states have further committed under Sustainable Development Goal 16 to ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. Therefore, we welcome the monitoring of civic space by the European Commission as part of checks and balances in its annual report on the rule of law in Europe. Now, if you follow our work, you will have heard our High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, regularly speak out publicly about situations of concern that affect civil society, journalists, and human rights defenders. You may also be familiar with the independent expert mechanisms. They're called special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council. They receive complaints, can raise their concerns with governments, and they carry out country visits. The first ones that come to mind are, of course, the special rapporteurs on human rights defenders and freedom of assembly. But other mandate holders also routinely address the question of civic space, as do UN treaty bodies. And I fully encourage you to engage with these mechanisms. In Ukraine, threats to civic space have been monitored by our human rights monitoring mission in December. It issued a dedicated report. And our human rights monitors continue to operate across the country to the full extent of their capacity in Ukraine, tracking civilian casualties and the destruction of civilian infrastructure like hospitals and schools. This engagement is part of our office's broader effort to monitor, preserve, and expand civic space globally by advocating for the protection of civil society actors at risk, including from intimidation and reprisals, for cooperating with the UN, which also becomes more and more common, unfortunately, by ensuring inclusive, diverse, safe, independent, and meaningful civil society participation in UN processes and fora, and by actively promoting at national level an open civic space to facilitate meaningful participation of civil society, both online and offline. And let's not forget, since 2019, for the first time in EU history, the mandate of the European Commission Vice President Jourova includes the protection of civic space within the EU, and this is an important step. We also welcome very much the active role of the European Parliament, as well as the upcoming package against slaps, which aims at tackling abusive lawsuits that silence watchdogs. But more can be done, like systematic impact assessments of EU laws and policies that impact on civic space, or this co-management of the EU recovery of the recovery funds that are granted by the EU to member states, co-management with civil society, or the creation of a rapid response system to act on the first signs of attacks against human rights defenders. The EU has a program like this. It's called the EU Protect Defenders program, and that's for activists outside the EU. Our regional office here in Brussels will continue to engage with the EU to support progress towards setting up such a mechanism for defenders inside the EU, and to make sure that whatever progress is made in the EU is compliant with international human rights treaties and recommendations from the international human rights mechanisms. Because as much as we certainly welcome the EU's effort to date, we also see the need for further concrete EU action to protect, support, and empower civil society across the EU. Indeed, during these very troubling times, this need is more urgent and relevant than ever. Dear colleagues, dear friends, we all know a lot is at stake. Failing to act and letting the space for civil society deteriorate within Europe risks deepening divisions within our societies, and it weakens our ability to stand up for human rights within Europe and on the international scene. Today's awards publicly recognize some of Europe's civil society struggles, a sign of support for the awarded activists and organizations, whom I warmly congratulate again, and to all the activists and organizations that stand up for human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and peace in Europe and beyond, even under the most challenging circumstances. As we pay tribute to their efforts, let us renew our commitment to join forces and show through concrete action that we truly are here for civil society and stand with them. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Birgit, for your powerful and inspiring words. So I will immediately jump into the award part to hear the stories that we are rewarding today. These also reflect some of the pan-European and country-specific trends that, again, are analyzed in the report. Let's start with Hungary, where over the last decade, we have seen the government taking measures to weaken all critical voices, including civic organizations, through restrictive legislations, cut-off funding, and aggressive rhetoric. The fear of sanctions against critical voices aims at creating a chilling effect and dividing the sector. But in this context, we have decided to award the Civilizatio Coalition that was created exactly to counter the attempt to divide, to establish solidarity, mutual support, and build strong coalition for a common cause, to put the care and preservation of nature at the center, showing the importance of coalition building. We have here with us Veronica Mora from the Civilizatio Coalition. Please, Vera, tell us your story.
Thank you, Jada, and I thank you for the European Civic Forum for deciding to award civilization for its efforts over the past 5 years. It's me sitting here and speaking today on behalf of the coalition. However, this is very much a communal effort and the joint work of the members involved. Members that are more than 30 or almost by now, almost 40 major civil society organizations active in Hungary in different areas ranging from human rights to community organizing to environment, women and LGBTQI issues. And this coalition came together in early 2017 as, let's say, an ad hoc effort to defend civil society and to protect against the then draft law on foreign funded organizations that was discussed in the parliament in spring 2017. Out of this ad hoc coalition, a more permanent platform and network was born, which has been active ever since then, so for more like 5 years now, and which has broadened its network. Besides the active members, it has a much bigger outreach to more than 300 organizations countrywide with whom it is in regular contact with. And besides keeping solidarity and speaking up for civil society and for one another, remaining our primary goal. Besides that, civilization also very much works on promoting a positive image of civil society in Hungary as a tool to withstand the attacks and increase the resilience of the organizations, but also serves as a platform of know-how and exchange among the members. This latter function has also came in very handy in the recent crisis. Informally, civilization became a platform for members to exchange information among themselves about who's doing what in relation to the war in Ukraine, and specifically the thousands or by now more than 200,000 refugees that came to Hungary as well. But also besides being an ad hoc platform for information exchange on this, also many of the civilization members have stepped up efforts and are very actively contributing to mitigating the impacts of the crisis. Some organizations provide information to the Ukrainian people coming to Hungary on legal procedures. Others are going to the border effectively with aid and relief. Again, others are organizing shelter and accommodation to people fleeing to Budapest and other major cities or just being in transit in Hungary. So after, as you said, Jada, after the pandemic, this current situation has again shown how civil society is able to mobilize in Hungary and act quickly and in a coordinated manner, much more so than the state structures do. So civilization, I would say, has achieved a lot in the past 5 years, which is quite unique also in the sense that there is no other similar network in Hungary, which is able to accommodate very different organizations, different in terms of size, approaches, attitudes, and for the past 5 years, we have been able to create a mode of operation where everybody has an equal say, where we have mutually accepted ways of working together. And therefore, together, we've been able to work united. And the legislation that brought us together back in 2017 on foreign funded organizations, as you all probably know, has been ruled in 2019 by the 2020 by the European Court of Justice to go against EU law on several counts. And the Hungarian government, a year later, in April 2021, finally retracted this law, however, introduced new potentially problematic measures in the face of new provisions concerning organizations capable of influencing public life and making them subject to inspections by the state audit body. We don't yet know how that works, but civilization continues to keep together, be vigilant, and help one another to withstand any further restrictions or attacks in Hungary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica, for sharing with us your story and also for the work of Civilizatio. Now from Hungary, we go to Belgium. We have been observing for years how acting in solidarity with migrants in the EU has become more and more difficult. And at the core of the trends of criminalization of solidarity witnessed in the EU, there is the criminalization of migration itself, both in the language and in the narrative, and the legal framework as well as in the legal framework of several EU member states, as it is described in the report in the analysis by PICUM. Faced with the lower protections for their rights, the undocumented people all over Europe are standing up to demand justice. But rights defenders of migrant background tend to be double discriminated and more vulnerable to repressions. For this, we believe that supporting them is more urgent than ever. And because of this urgency, today we award the Union de Sans-Papiers pour la Régularisation, representing a movement of undocumented people in Belgium, which is raising awareness on the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on undocumented people in Belgium and in Europe. Today, we have with us Ahmed Manar, spokesperson for the movement. Thank you, Ahmed. Please share your story with us.
Encore, merci à vous.
Thank you all. I'd like to thank the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Van Hout from the United Nations, and Mr. Bartolo for making all these efforts to support us during the hunger strike and until now. I would like to say how worried we are because of the humanitarian crisis in Europe, in Ukraine, which makes us suffer. So we are alongside our friends in Ukraine, and we share their sufferings and their despair. Concerning the undocumented present in Belgium, I don't like the word in French, sans-papiers, because it's demeaning against these people. There are people experiencing a situation of sub-citizenship. They are not registered, they are not visible, even if they may have lived for 20, 25 years in Belgium. These people sacrificed their lives, they sacrificed their youth, and they tried to be a part of the social tissue of Belgium. Yet the Belgian state excludes them from the national constitution. They deprives them of any possibility to live in freedom. These are people who are sub-citizens, and it's a permanent suffering that plights them. They are not victims once, they are victims in their work, they're exploited in their work. As a woman, they may be harassed. Sometimes they get wage, sometimes they don't get, they're not paid at all for many decades. Blood has been shed. Sufferings have been experienced. Many people have been the victims of such abuses. And during the health crisis, which was even double penalty for many, during this health crisis, we didn't lose courage. And we decided to make our plight even more visible. Our fight didn't start in 2021. It started 5 years ago. Now, for the last 5 years, we've been organizing flash actions to be more visible. And in 2021, we decided to be more visible, to have a better impact, a great impact. We decided to occupy the Church of the Béguinage in Brussels. And we also occupied a room in the Théâtre National in Belgium with the help of fellow artists. So we were able to work in cooperation with artists, with sex workers, with homosexuals. We decided to combine all these fights in order to launch a common movement which doesn't have a political color, neither a political nor a religious color. What unites us is the belief that fundamental rights, human rights, are rights for all. And we want to be free, we want to be able to work and live. That's our main objective.
Undocumented people are very often labeled. We are stigmatized, and because of that, we suffer from stereotypes. We are undocumented people are discriminated, but they are not begging for assistance. And for about 2 years now, we've tried to get rid of these labels that are put on undocumented workers. So these people are not begging. They are not begging for assistance. They are workers. They have potential. They have a know-how in any field, technologies, handicraft. They work in hospitality sector, in the agricultural sector as well. So they are undocumented workers. And I realize that people think that that these people came to their country just to beg for money, to beg for assistance. But in different regions of Belgium, we've succeeded in giving a good and decent definition to these people. They are undocumented workers, they pay for their houses, they pay their energy bills, they meet their own needs, and they participate in the Belgian economic life. So since we have occupied the Béguinage Church, but also the campus and the National Theatre, and after 6 months, we've realized that we've been victims of arbitrary arrests. We suffered pressure from the police. Tear gas was used against us. There were very violent and hostile demonstrations against these undocumented workers. And despite of the occupation, we couldn't achieve our objectives. That's why on 23rd of May, we started a hunger strike with more than 75 people. And the hunger strike was a kind of a shock. And it was heard about everywhere in the world. There was a big media coverage as compared to what was done before. So we enjoyed a lot of visibility during our hunger strike. International media visited us, including American media. There was a journalist from the BBC, from Belarus, from Ukraine. So all the international media was there. So 475 people, and this created a real shock. And we gave visibility to the demands of undocumented workers. And we enjoyed an unprecedented visibility. We are not proud of that, but it's a duty. It's a duty for us. And we had to fulfill it. On 21st of July, we reached an oral agreement with the government. And after that, we suspended the hunger strike, and we moved on to the next step. That's to say, filing the different reports. Of course, the hunger strike had impact on health of people, their psychological health, but also their physical health suffered from the hunger strike. They suffered from PTSD, from claustrophobia, they had nightmares, they couldn't sleep well. But despite of that, we started to fill in their files, and we started to introduce them at the alien's office. Unfortunately, the government failed to keep its word, and the media are talking about a betrayal, but for us it's a real plot, it's a conspiracy against these people who are very brave. So our movement continues despite of the negative answers we continue to get from the authorities. But despite of all this, of the setbacks, we will continue our fight. It's important for our state of mind. So it's a slight backlash, but we won't stop, and we will continue our fight. And recently, we turned towards the Brussels court, and we will also take action at the level of the European Tribunal. So we will continue to fight for the undocumented workers who are part of our movement. So we will continue our fight, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ahmed, for sharing your story with us. We go from Belgium to France now, where we have a really strong associative and mobilization culture with thousands of peaceful assemblies taking place every year. And this has also been supported by public policies that have been nurturing and supporting the sector. But since 2015, we have seen these policies being restrictive more and more. as it's explained in the analysis by la Ligue des Droits de l'Homme. And we have seen the right to protest being put under increased pressure. So for this, we today award the Observatory of Police Practices, a network of local observatories that bear witness to the experience of demonstrators across France. These observatories have played a crucial role to defend freedom of peaceful assembly, and we want to recognize this role. Thank you, Nathalie Tejo, for being here with us.
Merci pour cette invitation et surtout un grand
merci. Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you very much to European Civic Forum to give an award to our observatories. There are local initiatives, and I am the national contact person for Ligue des Droits de l'Homme. Our observatories set themselves a mission, that's to say that we'd like to protect demonstrations as a mode of collective expression, which is part of democracy. Daniel Tartakovsky, an historian who has been analyzing social movements since the 19th century, says that demonstrations are the simplest form of popular initiative referendum, allowing the expression of ideas that seek to be included in the public debate or that challenge the powers that be. Today, I have a special thought for the people of Ukraine who are victims of the Russian army's bombardment, but also for the demonstrators in Russia and Belarus who oppose Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against Putin. More than 10,000 women and men have been arrested in an attempt to prevent their voices from being heard. A few weeks ago, the dissolution of Memorial was another step in the drive to eradicate all human rights defenders. Even if their voices are prevented, we know that they are with us against war crimes. In any case, we can see that the choice of the European Civic Forum to highlight the work of independent observatories amongst the tens of thousands of actions that make every day the strength and the richness of active citizenship in Europe is quite topical. Turning to the police practices we've been observing in France for some years now, there's been a change in about around 2016 and 15. They include levels of physical violence that have not been seen for decades. It is this level and their repetition that has led to the creation of these observatories, documenting all the violations of the right to demonstrate, from the most minor to the most reprehensible and judicially condemnable. And even though repression is heavier in dictatorships, I met one of the main architects of the protest movement to demand democracy in Hong Kong, and he translated messages in Chinese from the authorities who were using the way French police intervened during the demonstrations as a pretext to ironize their demand for democracy, with France as the symbol. So, fighting to allow the exercise of a fundamental freedom is the goal of our citizen observatories. The presence of independent observers sometimes leads the police to refrain from using unjustified force. In any case, it makes it possible to document an unnecessary or disproportionate use of force. We act at all stages of the freedom to demonstrate, and not only in situations where there is a risk of physical violence. We've been able to document the misuse of the law, such as bans on demonstrations, some of which were challenged and suspended by the administrative judge, such as the statement by the police, by the Paris police prefect, that a demonstration was banned while it was in progress, which is impossible under French law, and moreover, without even issuing an order, as well as the use of force against demonstrators on the sole ground that the demonstration had not been declared beforehand, which is contrary to the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. We were able to document violent arrests, including against people who were already handcuffed and on the ground, the use of weapons of war against demonstrators, the use of which is totally inappropriate with regard to a crowd, LBD 40s, as well as offensive grenades, the use of dismantling grenades in the middle of demonstrators without any threat to the forces of order. During a social movement that lasted several months, more than 20 people lost an eye, a hand, or suffered serious neurological disorders at the hands of the police. We were able to observe the tension created amongst the demonstrators by the law enforcement through arrests in the middle of the crowd, by violently pushing the demonstrators through the use of tear gas grenades and the use of force without any violence on the part of the demonstrators, which increases the tension, but also through the encirclement of the demonstrators, as if they were potential delinquents, or through their being thrown out of the crowd without any reason other than the desire to deter them from taking part in the demonstration. We saw plainclothes policemen pushing demonstrators against law enforcement officers, triggering the response with beatings. We've seen journalists arrested or beaten for filming, even though they were clearly members of the press. We were also able to help document a video investigation by the newspaper Le Monde, showing a police commissioner going out of his way to beat journalists who had stepped aside to let the police charge pass. It is our findings that have enabled us to advocate or help victims. And of course, we've been targeted for violence ourselves. So far, no proceedings against the police forces that carried it out have been successful. There has also been prosecutions against women observers who have been acquitted, but they are all ramming procedures aimed at intimidating us. I will stop here, even though I would like to tell you many more things about what's happening in my country, but I must conclude. So I would say to you that we're going to use the prize that you're giving us to argue, particularly in the courts, that we are doing a task that is internationally recognized as necessary for the defense of freedoms and for the preservation of democracy. This award is a support to force the state to respect the freedom of demonstration, which we defend. Again, many thanks to the European Civic Forum.
Thank you, Natalie, and to all those that are interested to read more about all these stories. The interviews are included in the report, as well in-depth this analysis of the context in which these stories happen. Now, I would like to go to Bulgaria, where in a very difficult context, the NGO De Vize for LGBTI Action operates a legal defense program providing support to the LGBTI community in the country. The award recognizes the tireless commitment of the NGO, as well as the lawyers, and especially Denica Lubenova, in protecting and strengthening LGBTI rights, and the important victory at the European Court of Justice, recognizing the right to citizenship of kids from same-sex couples. So now I give the floor to Bonimir Totev and Vaneta Limberova. Thank you. The word is yours.
Thank you very much. It's Vaneta speaking. I hope that you're hearing me. Unfortunately, my camera stopped working, so probably you can't see me at the moment. Apologies for this, and very sorry that Denica, our lawyer, can't join us today. But I'm very proud and privileged to be here and to be given the award, and I'm accepting it as a chairperson, as in the name of all my colleagues. We are very glad that our efforts were recognized, and especially the fight for LGBTI community and rainbow families for equality. Our country, Bulgaria, still lacks protection of rainbow families and same-sex partners and same-sex parents. And our children are still systematically discriminated both by legislation and the lack of it, of course, and by the institutions. We see the same as in our EU member states countries. There are some countries that have full recognition of same-sex parents, or to some extent, but while we rainbow families exercise the freedom of movement within EU, we could see that there is still disproportionate discrimination against our community. Through the work of our legal program, we were being able to identify the case of baby Sarah, which illustrates the struggles of rainbow families in Europe. We are happy to have the decision of the Court of Justice of the European Union that was delivered later in 2021, as it's one step further that will make us a little bit easier to fully exercise our European Union citizenship and to be able to freely move within the EU. We have the estimate that the case of baby Sarah affects the lives of around 100,000 children in Europe, children who are born and raised in rainbow families. And through the judgment of the CJEU, we now could guarantee that at least the free movement could be exercised, as every member state now is obliged to issue identity card or a passport to the kids born within rainbow families who are having same-sex parents. We are very thankful that we have been able to work on the case and to continue working here in Bulgaria with the support we have been given through the years, and especially last year with the financial support we've been given through working with the project with the European Commission, the Active Citizens Fund in Bulgaria, the so important support we received by the Bulgarian Fund for Women, and also the support we are receiving by ILGA Europe, their litigation team, and also our partners, colleagues from Accept Romania, who worked years before. You remember probably they worked with the common case. And probably I'll pass the floor now to my colleague Burimir.
Thank you. Thanks, Renata. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thanks for the recognition. If I could just sneak in a sentence of thanks from our organization as well to the brave families and individuals who approach us and approach our legal program with their stories, with their cases that eventually lead to strategic cases like the case of baby Sarah, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been able to bring about a court decision like this. So the existence of our program and our support is really dependent on the legal empowerment of the LGBTIQ+ community. So we're very thankful, and once more apologies that my colleague Benita is not here to accept this in person, and that we can't be together in a room in Brussels, but maybe next time. So thank you very much again from us.
Thank you. I was planning to say it at the end, but we will try to meet in person later during the year to be together, to celebrate together, but also to give an handover of the medals because they are made later on in Florence. So next we go to Poland. And today we award one important initiative of self-organization of a democratic process in the context of the preparation of the national recovery plans. Civic organizations refused to be silenced and marginalized in the institutional process. They organized participatory public hearings to make their voice heard. This award shows the importance not only to work together among civil society, but also to build strong alliances with trade unions and local authorities. We have with us Kuba Wiknaski from Lampard Foundation and Carolina Dresden from OHCHR. Thank you.
Thank you. At the beginning, I would like to express my gratitude for the award. I want to thank you on behalf of all of the participants of the process, people and the organization who took the effort.
Carolina, are you around?
Yes, I will start and then I will give the floor to you, Kuba. We will share our speaking time, but I will start just to tell you a few words who we are and why we decided to act. I'm here as the president of the National Federation of Polish NGOs, together with my friend Kuba, president of the Stocznia Foundation. And talking about Polish awarded initiative, our two organizations, National Federation and Stocznia, took the coordination of the process, but it wouldn't be possible without over 500 speakers and the strong coalition of the NGOs and social partners, as well as local authorities, who took an active role in the consultation process. 1 year ago, we understood that the National Recovery and Resilience Plan for Poland that the government was preparing would not include consultation with civil society. There was no dialogue about recovery plan. We were confronted with the final and almost completed document that only allowed for the minor modification. The only way was to take the things into our hands. And we were sure that we have to make this possible and show that civil society is strong, even stronger than the government expected. During the hearings, we received more than 2,500 propositions and recommendations from very different points of view, experts, local actors, local authorities, citizens, students, trade unions, and social partners. And we relied on union regulation to ensure that our consultations took place and included the presence of civil society. That also meant ensuring that all actors are treated equally as partners, as the regulation puts economic and social partners, as well as NGOs on the same level of the collaboration. I'm very pleased that everyone took this hearing seriously. Really say we don't know if our proposals are adopted in the documents. Reaction of the government, it's not clear. We didn't see all of the last versions of the documents sent to the Commission. But thanks to this process of consultation, we obtain other important goal. These hearings stimulated our interactions among civil society actors. Indeed, by bringing people together, this process allowed us to build trust, so we can really rely on each other for close collaborative work going forward. Additionally, it laid down the foundations for the other collaborations with business, social partners, trade unions, as well as local authorities. By bringing people together, this process allowed us to build trust so we can really rely on each other for close collaborative work. And we believe that it's a good promise for the challenging future. Kuba, if you would like to say a few words more, I will give you the floor.
Just a few words, because I think I'm one too many Paul in this kind of a very nice meeting. So I will be very, very brief. I'm sitting in the place where we just a quarter an hour we've finished a kind of a gathering of NGOs who works right now in Warsaw on this 3 railway stations. As you obviously know, just about 2 million people appeared in Poland, and the main traffic goes through the 3 stations here in Warsaw. So the first line of defense, the first line of welcoming is NGOs, not only NGOs, even, individual activists, several thousands of people volunteered. So right now we are in this kind of a rapid type of a prototyping of everything and trying to find a good division of labor between us, between local government and the government, and many other, including international organization, etc., etc. So I'm in a kind of a hurry, but what I can say, we start this public hearing process more or less a year ago. And we surprise everyone that within 2 weeks, we're able to put together the process, which otherwise might be planned for a year or something. And still about 4,000 people were, present. There was so many ideas. We still have no response from the government. What of this was really kind of incorporated into the important document. But anyway, we keep trying, and that event actually is obviously with a very different scale, but also is a situation with the civil society by its nature, I guess. It's so fast, flexible, and open, but it's not going to last forever. So we are very much looking for this kind of cooperative approach from the local government, and I think it works with the local business. We're still waiting for government to come and to help with that thing. I'm not trying to say they do nothing, but obviously there is nobody was expecting that kind of a size of a challenge. So right now we have to learn really fast. And to conclude, because we're on the kind of a European forum, it's exactly what that lunatic from Russia did was basically probably targeted to basically for a kind of a stronger division within Europe and taking its own chunk and swallow it. But right now, as we see it here in this country, but also many, many people from outside Poland, from all over Europe, you have like more or less 1,000 buses going from Denmark to pick up people here. There's obviously a challenge of coordination, but basically there is the number of people, and the challenge we have in front of us, not only Poland as Europe, is basically to kind of to be prepared for organizing. Obviously, a lot of those people don't want even to leave Poland because they believe they might come back there, but suddenly there are more and more places there is no way to come back. So they probably will stay here for a time, but then we need a kind of a cooperation with Europe, with the local cities, local organization, networks, much more than just humanitarian organization to find a place for them in Europe. Thank you so much for the award. It really, it was important for all of us, not only for our organization, but, hundreds and thousands of people who were part of that effort a year ago. Thank you.
Thank you. So we were just hearing about Denmark, and we are now approaching the Danish story. Denmark is a country that maybe you would not expect on the civic space report, because it's a democratic, well-performing country with high scores in the most essential democratic variables and championing civil society globally. But in recent years, we have seen pressures there as well, especially disproportionately targeting racialized and marginalized groups. And this was also the case 1 year ago of the law package Security for All Danes, which included a ban on assemblies in specific areas. So today we award the CSOs Amnesty International Denmark, ActionAid Denmark, and NIT Europa for their win in defense of civic space and the right of assembly. Thank you. We have with us Lisa Blinkenberg from Amnesty International Denmark.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great, thanks. I will be talking on behalf of all the organizations, so Amnesty International Denmark, ActionAid Denmark, NIT Europa, and the working group under Global Focus. I personally would like to thank these organizations and the people behind for the great collaboration we had as we worked together all along, and for the international solidarity. And thanks a lot also to the European Civic Forum for giving us this prize and the possibility to tell our story in this important forum. So what were our goals and how did we succeed? Our goal was to stop a law proposal introduced in January 2021. It was the so-called Security for All Danes proposal, which introduced a ban on assembling in a specific place to which there is an ordinary access. It could be a park, a square, or a road. And this could be for a period up to 30 days, which could then be prolonged. And the ban would be introduced by the police if a group of people had showed an insecurity inciting behavior. Together, we managed to direct attention on the law proposal and the negative impact it would have on the right to assembly, freedom of movement, rule of law, right to privacy, and principle of non-discrimination. Our main recommendation was to reject the assembly ban in the law proposal, and that was exactly what happened. We saw a real shift in the parliamentarians' attitudes towards the proposal, the majority being fully supportive at the first discussion of the law proposal to finally and timely reject it. So how is the civic space functioning in Denmark? We have a democracy, and Denmark usually plays a leading role regarding civic space on the international scene. If we look into the national scene, we have a Minister of Justice, Nick Hækkerup, who is a member of the Social Democrats who are in power in Denmark. And he has said, freedom depends on our security. And we, of course, have opposed that statement. But the case also shows that the fragility of democracy, so when human rights are constrained, democracy crumbles. We have seen national restrictions due to COVID-19. We have seen emergency laws restricting people's assembling in larger groups, and double sentences were applied if a crime was related to COVID-19. So are we as civil society always involved in the Danish law process? It is very seldom that a law proposal from government is being rejected. The rejection of the assembly ban was only the fourth time it happened within the last 10 years. And especially when it comes to refugee rights and discrimination, civil society sometimes only get hours to comment on important law proposals, giving us no real chance for involvement. So why did we succeed? We had time this time to comment on the proposal, and we started on a very early stage. We joined efforts across the organizations and had a common goal, which of course then had a wider impact. We could use more resources and skills. We did strategic planning and discussed what would work. And then we made a written response with our analysis to the legislation. And then we reached out to international allies to put an international pressure on Denmark. So we received and could add on our advocacy work international criticism. We had a letter from the European Civic Forum, from Civicus, and the European Centre for Not-for-Profit Law, who criticized the legislation for violating international conventions. And this international pressure was mentioned by Danish politicians at Parliament. We had a letter from 5 UN special rapporteurs. And then we also did a mapping of like-minded parliamentarians. We had meetings with them, and we also reached out to the unusual suspects who had close contacts to the parliamentarians we couldn't reach. So, and we also reached out to right holders. And we had some SoMe campaigning and an op-ed in the large Danish newspapers. So, and during the whole process, we would evaluate and change strategies based on how it was received and new information on what would work better. So actually the support for the law was dropped once politicians realized that all people in Denmark could be affected by the law, although we could see that it would most probably affect those people with a non-Danish background. So, what does this case show? This case shows us that even countries that see themselves as champions of democracy, they can backslide, and that we always must monitor the situation and act accordingly. It also shows us that when we collaborate across continents and organizations, we stand a better chance in winning. So we hope and urge the EU to step up actions on protecting civic space and human rights defenders, both inside and outside the EU. And this is needed more than ever with the present situation. But once again, we really appreciate the Civic Pride Awards and would like to thank the European Civic Forum for this prize. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Lisa, and to all the colleagues. We have one last story, and I apologize for the delay. But we have with us Olga from Belarus. The ECF steering committee has decided to award a special commendation to the Belarusian women mobilizing for democracy in honor for their fight in the streets in 2020. We especially praise the nonviolent protest. When we chose this award, it had a different meaning, but today is still very relevant. Olga, thank you for being with us.
Hello once again. Do you hear me? Okay, I hope everybody hear what I will say. Thank you for the honor to be part of this award and for the possibility, and for the possibility to speak up. My process started in 2020 when my country was robbed, when our voices were stolen. We stood up for our right to choose our president, to decide which way our country should go. We stood up for our freedom. Then even more people stood up against the sea of violence that came upon us from the regime. Somebody would say that our protest was too peaceful, but now I know for sure from a very reliable source that Russian police troops were in Belarus waiting for a command to fight in case local police wouldn't have managed to suppress the protest. So even if we have protested in a more radical and aggressive manner, they would stop the protest, but only with more victims. Now we have what we have. The repressions continue. We have over 1,000 political prisoners. Hundreds of thousands have left the country. The best people are put into jail for 10, 15, 18 years, and trials are still ongoing. In 2020, I personally got a fine for a photo with a white, red, white flag. My husband was severely beaten and spent 15 days in prison for participation in a peaceful march. Now, such penalties seems nothing. Now, if you get 15 days arrest, you are lucky. Lucky that it's just administrative penalty and not a criminal case they put on you. And it's important to remember that conditions in Belarusian prisons are awful. It's a torture, a nightmare. And knowing all this, people continue to protest now against the war. On the 27th of February, about 10,000 people were arrested in Belarus for their protest against war. We understand that this war is happening also because Lukashenko's regime has survived, and it survived because of Putin's support. And now Putin uses my country as a bridgehead for his troops, artillery and planes. They don't even ask Lukashenko if they can do it. They simply came here, although Lukashenko tries to act as if he decides something. He will be at power until Putin is at power. And it's clear now that even if Lukashenko disappears, Putin will still rule in Belarus because the Belarusian government is addicted to him, so to speak. Two dictatorships are supporting each other, thus making each other stronger in their craziness. And that's scary. People all over the world should learn that there is no such thing as a small country with a small dictatorship which doesn't bother us much. We should remember that it's not people's choice to live under such regimes. We should understand that if you ignore dictators, they will anyway make you notice them by ruining fates, lives, and countries. On behalf of the women of Belarus, I declare that we are against the dictators, we are against the war. We beg the whole world to help Ukraine in all possible ways. Don't think that Putin will eat Ukraine and be satisfied. Remember that once Europe thought that Hitler would be satisfied with Poland. It's just a little bit of history repeating. So let's stop the war as soon as possible, unless it's too late. Free Ukraine equals free Belarus equals free and safe Europe. Thank you. That was what I wanted to tell to all of you. This is my message for this
Thank you
meeting.
all for your words. Our thoughts, of course, go to the brave Ukrainian people in their hopes for peace, freedom, and dignity. And we stand with all those that express openly their opposition to the war. And we'll stand for peace. Now I pass the word to Pietro Bartolo, who we thank very much for hosting us today.
Okay, grazie Giada, grazie a tutti.
Thank you, Giada, thank you everybody. Good afternoon. Well, first of all, I have to apologize. I haven't been able to connect earlier on, but I had to participate to a meeting at the Commission. That's why. Well, the European Civic Forum award meeting is now a fixture in our planning, is a fixed date in our planning, and I'm happy because we established actions and initiatives. We were able to mobilize people in support of people who are without papers and who have no legal status, those who are called sans-papiers, although our friend Hamed doesn't like the term, but it is now how they're called here in Belgium. These are people whom the legal status is not recognized, to whom the legal status is not recognized. It is important to carry out a civic action, and it is important to be here today, to give the awards to the people who have invested themselves for what they did in the world. Unfortunately, today too, we are seeing each other virtually, and on top of that, this is the sadness of the circumstances in Ukraine. It's a difficult war in Ukraine. That's one of the darkest moment of the recent times, and I think almost nobody would have imagined to have to live through such a period, such a time. Instinctively, one would like to stop everything, because in the face of such violence, we are overwhelmed with this by this violence, and we are confused now, dazed and confused by this violence. We don't even know how to behave rightly. So we are in a great confusion, and I have to say there are no easy solutions here, and we can have a little impact on what are the global political dynamics. But I'm firmly convinced that we can play a vital role here. Nevertheless, we can at least send a clear message of peace. And we can do this by just going on, by just marching on with our work, keeping the fight on for a better society. And it is also necessary, it is urgent to go on with our own lives, to enjoy our freedoms, our liberties that are not there anymore, neither in Ukraine nor in Russia. The democratic values, as the freedom of expression, the freedom of associations, the freedom of thought, are jeopardized in this particular moment in time by the war. And we have to say very clearly that for no reason we will accept to do without those rights and those values. It is important, therefore, to talk about this space of action, civic space of action of the organizations of the civil society in a moment where, because of nationalisms in certain European countries, the civic space is limited with the pretext, the alibi of the pandemics first and then the war. So it is even more important to defend these values, to discuss, and to award those who deserve in the civic society to be congratulated for what they do, because it's a vital role in the defense of not just values, but also the principles of our living together. We need civic space for a debate. And this has to help the system stay together. In these last years, we have gone through many crises, and the civic organizations have done their part and gave their own contribution, and we saw it during the crisis of the Mediterranean, where the NGOs have occupied the space left empty by the states and by Europe, that left these people in the sea. You know that there is a criminalization of the NGOs. We have seen it during the pandemic. We have seen it at the border between Bosnia and Croatia, at the border between Poland and Belarus, where citizens incur the risk of suffering heavy sanctions only because they've offered a water of bottle to a migrant, and they can be taken to court for this, and they could even go to jail for 5 years just because they have offered human assistance to people that were abandoned. That, unfortunately, I saw these places, and we see the contribution of the organization of the civil society in the response that we are giving in countries like Poland, where the state is totally absent. Only the civic society organizations are organizing, are managing the situation by organizing themselves to assist the refugees from Ukraine. So I think that the civic society deserve to be awarded. As a doctor in Lampedusa, I always collaborated with the organizations of the civic society, and I'm happy to do this now as an MEP. The NGOs are a bridge, and they are our eyes, our ears in the field. And without their contributions, our work would be much more complicated and difficult. So that's why I'm happy to assist this award ceremony today. I'd like to thank the organizations that are awarded today, but I also want to thank all the organizations that are not awarded today, but are there in the field working as you do, knowing that your work is precious, human. I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm very proud to be here today. And I also thank the interpreters that gave us this possibility to listen to each other. I wish you good work going forward. I hope to be close to you. I hope to cooperate with you like I've been doing in the last years. And let's hope that many of our battles will be resolved and that we will be able to deal with less heavy situations. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, Pietro. Is it my turn to say a few concluding words? Dear friends, Dear colleagues, dear Pietro, dear Birgit, following the crisis, the pandemic crisis, which is still not behind us. Can you hear me?
Bien, si. Je disais qu'après la crise de la pandémie qui n'est toujours pas derrière nous, loin de là, voilà la guerre en Ukraine.
Following this pandemic, we are now facing a war in Ukraine. Crisis after crisis, we've been given the lesson how everyone's safety depends on how safe others are. Today's interconnected global challenges, namely the extreme poverty, inequality, the climate emergency, violent conflicts, the trend of autocratization and shrinking civic space, and the ongoing pandemics, all that call for a new impetus to international solidarity. The dramas that are unfolding now with the war in Ukraine will have lasting consequences in Europe and beyond. The most vulnerable will pay the price. In the most dramatic situations, civic and social actors play a crucial role, helping people in need, often with few resources and little power. They are often the first ones to come and the last ones to leave. But as we heard today, to do so, civic organizations also need to be supported by institutions and public policies. That's what Madam the Commissioner said. I call for a European civil society strategy that protects, supports, and empowers civil society is more urgent today than ever in times of peace. It should be ready also in times of crisis. And I would like to raise one extra point. To stay connected, to fight for humanitarian corridors, all that was done in partnership. It was not our main task, but we had to do it in an urgent way. And we will have to voice our added value in all that, because our specificity is to promote civic society. Civic society organizations are places where we are meant to make democracy breathe and live. Hence, when people are better, when things are better, we cannot say we can do that now. We cannot imagine now how it can be done. But in the future, we will have to support the Ukrainian organizations. A few weeks ago, I met Ukrainian NGOs which didn't believe that war would happen. And today, I tried to find back some of my friends in Ukraine. It's much more difficult today. But as soon as it is possible to put into place again these sponsorship actions, we'll have to do it. And I will close by thanking you all, by thanking our partners, Pietro, Birgit, and all those who among you invested themselves in this fight to try and alleviate a bit of the sufferings experienced by the refugees who arrive on a daily basis in Europe. I'd like to thank you all because we are doing great work in the European Civic Forum. And this is acknowledged by the presence of the Commissioner today and by the active involvement of many members of the European Parliament. And with the convention at the end of the French presidency, I'm quite proud to see the success of our organization. A convention that should hand over its recommendations next Tuesday. So you are all invited to come and hear the recommendations of this convention. I also invite you to come on the 30th of June in Paris, when takes place our General Assembly, another important event, which will be a moment when we will take hold of the recommendations of the Convention with the help of the French Economic and Social Committee, which will put at our disposal their facilities to hold this huge event of so many representatives of the civil society in Europe. So I invite you on the 30th of June. Sorry for being long, says Jean-Marc, but I'd like to thank now, as a way, by way of conclusion, I would like to thank you all and wish you a good day.